before we get started, I feel like desire discrepancy is one of those like almost awkwardly clinical terms that's painfully obvious, but maybe not super clear. So, can you maybe walk us through what we're talking about when we say SDD or sexual desire discrepancy?
Yeah, it's a bit different, STD. Um, um, Basically, the simplest way that you can look at it is when you're looking at a couple, regardless of the gender of the couple, one person wants more sex and the other person wants like less sex.
Sure.
And that's very normal. It occurs on a regular basis, depending on different time in your life. Like, I don't know if you're menopausal, if you're having a baby, or if somebody dies in the family and you have to take care of an older parent, or there's children in the house and you're completely exhausted and there's too many chores, or you're about to have a promotion and you have to put in more work, therefore you're tired. So that your level of wanting to have sex will be high or low depending on where you are in your life, and then it doesn't always match with your partner. And the not matching, the difference in the sexual desire, the difference in wanting sex, is what creates a problem. Now, the bigger the gap, usually the more it creates discomfort in the relationship.
Sure.
And if that length of time that you have a big gap gets longer and longer, we're talking, it's not 1 week, it's turning into a month, it's turning into a year, it's turning into 5 years, then it becomes a problem where people get dissatisfied. If nobody's dissatisfied, there's no problem. So if it's okay and you're able to live with your partner, um, um, with this issue, and it's not creating fights, and like you're okay with it, you understand your partner and life goes on, you never need to seek the help of a professional.
Yeah. In order for something to be a problem, it has to cause an issue. I hear
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
But there are two parts of your definition I really love and really want to highlight because I felt like at the top you did not center this around identity. You know, you
Mhm.
said you may be at a place in your life where perhaps you're struggling with sexuality because of this, because of that. Certainly everybody is going to have their own maybe like erotic set point that is going to be, somewhat genetic or personality or identity based. But I think we maybe rush to blame it on who we are as people without really taking a moment to like look at our lives and maybe find a little bit of compassion for the
Uh,
stress and everything else that our partner might be under.
oh, definitely. So like when you look at not wanting to have sex, where does that come from? It comes from so many different places. It can be hormonal, it can be you're taking medication that's decreasing your libido, it can be having too many plates that are spinning at the same time and you don't have time to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself means making sure that your sexuality is also fulfilled. So I believe that it's not like you have to look at why the person is not feeling sexual at that period in their life, and how you can help them with that problem. And if that problem is resolved, then maybe the person's sexuality, their wants, their desire, is going to go back to a normal that is pretty much like it used to be before.
Yeah, and I appreciate the focus on distress because again, this is a place where we tend to blame things on identity or like personhood.
Yeah.
And so it can start to feel like there's a right way and a wrong way to it. And so remembering that whether you have sex once a week or once a day or once a month, it's really not about the quantity so much as it is the goodness of fit. Is that all fair to say?
it's very important that it fits in the relationship, or like, so people kind of get together and they have that image that the sex that they have in the first 2 years that they're together is going to be like this for the rest of their life. And this is a very big misconception. So the in lust phase of the relationship is very different than the part of like the sex that you're going to have at the beginning is going to be different than the sex that you're going to have
Sure.
in a long-term relationship.
Yeah, or to translate that into poly terms, new relationship energy is a hell of a drug.
It's all of those good hormones that are flooding your brain, making you look at the world with pink goggles. It's spectacular, I tell you. It's a,
It's worth it for an occasional hit.
yeah.
But I think this is a pretty straightforward idea. But how common is it for couples to not just deal with this, but to really struggle with it?
So if you look at long-term relationship, about 80% of people will have a discrepancy in their sexual desire at some point in the relationship. And it does not necessarily mean that if it comes back a second time, it's going to be the same person that's going to be the person with the low sex drive or the
Mhm.
high sex drive. It can flip because your circumstances that you're going through in your life can vary in the couple at different times. So this is completely natural. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess
So
I
let me put a little bit more numbers in there.
sure.
If you look at low sexual desire, you're going to have women that will complain about it. About 1 in 3 will suffer low sexual desire at one point in their life. For men, it can be closer to 1 in 6. So is it gender based? Not necessarily. There are hormones that do affect it. There are states like, like women's that are going to go through pregnancy or menopause will be affected differently based on their hormones. But the fluctuation of sexual desire in women has a massive range, and so does the fluctuation in sexual desire found in men. So you can have a couple, let's say a heteronormative couple, that will be together, and then the man is going to have the low sex drive and the woman is going to have the high sex drive because the differences are so huge.
I so appreciate you highlighting that. We so often, I mean, anytime we're talking about sex, tend to say men are like this and women are like that, forgetting that within group variance is almost always greater
Yep,
than out group variance, than the
exactly.
variance between the two genders. And the stereotype here is almost always that there is like this horny man and the wife just won't give it up. And that exists in some number of couples. But I mean, at least in the people that I work with, it is more often going to be the women that have the higher libido. And I know I've seen statistics that place it almost as high as 60%. Does that line up with your experience at all?
Uh, well, in my practice, when I have discrepancy in sexual desire, I have a very strong monogamous heterosexual part of my practice, that those couples have young children, and because of that, the woman has a tendency to have an added workload. So she's taking care of the kids, she's working, she doesn't have time for herself. At the end of the day, she's completely exhausted,
Hmm.
she's touched out, and at like her entire day is people going next to her going, I want this, I need that. And she's always answering to other people's wants and other people's needs, where she's always coming last. At the end of the day, when the husband comes home from his day of work and he didn't have as many chores to do in the house or with the kids, in the majority of the couples that I see in my practice. So I'm not saying that it's like this
Sure.
for everybody.
Well, and I guess I also just wanted to highlight the touch component because
Y-
you mentioned that briefly, but I think it's really
Oh
significant
yeah.
to remember that if you are holding, picking up, carrying, soothing, stroking
Yeah.
a child all day, your touch needs are going to be very, very different than if you are sitting in front of a keyboard all day.
Exactly. So basically the woman feels that her body does not belong to herself. So the last thing that she wants is to feel something inside of her that's like not hers, not wanted, not anything. So like it can like her libido, her sex drive can crash drastically, and his like he needs to feel like he's loved and he's wanted. So it's very difficult because she used to be a partner, a sexual partner, a loving partner, and now since she's become a mother, she's not a partner anymore. So like I see more couples in my practice where it's the woman that has a tendency to have a lower sex drive,
Mhm.
but it's still an approach that you don't put the blame on the person with the low sexual desire. You put the blame on this difference that we're facing, that one person wants it more and one person wants it less. We're going to address it. We're two teammates and we're going to address the problem together. So the problem is the enemy, we're a team and we need to conquer it together. And that's the approach usually that's makes it so that the couple doesn't fight with one another, pointing fingers and blaming one another.
Yeah, I mean, that's just good couples work, right? Or really
Yeah.
just being a healthy couple is to recognize that it's not you versus your partner, it's you and your partner versus the problem, in so much as we even need to use like violent rhetoric around it. But I do feel like, particularly when it comes to sex, we're so quick to pathologize. We're so quick to say horn dog or nympho or
Yeah.
prude or unmasculine, or we very quickly seem to go for the jugular here when we talk about people's identities. And I'm curious if you would highlight like a particular cause of that. I mean, I know we're living in a very patriarchal, sex negative culture, but what do you feel is at work in some of these gendered stereotypes?
Well, I find that I guess for a guy, you go, oh, you always want to have sex if you're going to put it that way. And then it's like, well, obviously, he's a guy. He's going to want to, like, it's easy for that person. And obviously, the girl is frigid, which is a term that we don't even use anymore. But it's always an accusation of the sorts. It's easy to put it like this. We've seen it over and over in movies. It's represented that the mean woman doesn't want to have sex. There's never a reason why she doesn't want to have sex. It's just because she's cold, she's not
Mm-hmm.
receptive, you
It's a
know?
personality type.
Exactly. I think the media is a lot to do with the blame that we put on the gender role or how sexy you have to be. Um, yeah, I find that every time I see a movie, it fits in a very cute little box, you know, it never
Yeah.
comes out of that box.
I mean, and many of these depictions, like if you take a random romantic comedy, it's
Mm.
not necessarily the case that they're modeling something wrong or that doesn't exist or that's unhealthy. It's just that they show you one type of couple in every single film, and then healthy, normal
Over.
people who
Yeah.
are in many ways typical, which typical is not necessary to be healthy. But even in situations where you are in the majority, you might not realize it. And partly because we're not really talking about it and we're not really measuring it. We don't generally have very good statistics here, but also people are so quick to pick up on some of these negative stereotypes because of the finger wagging and the pressure put on our sexuality.
Yeah. No, definitely I agree with what you're saying. I I would like to have more filmmakers that come from a more diversified background than just heteronormative white guy and a certain age. Like
Yeah.
it seems to be the same story spoon fed to me. Like
Yeah,
with
or
the,
if a character is sexually diverse, that's their entire character.
yeah.
And we're just now starting to open up to orientation, but anyhow, I don't mean to get too off track, but media depictions do upset me.
No, I agree.
Sure. Well, so what sorts of problems show up when a desire discrepancy or mismatched desire in a relationship isn't dealt with or managed in some sort of way?
So the biggest problem is that there's going to be a finger pointed to one person. So
Hmm.
it's if you're going to have the conversation when there's a sexual problem, most people don't have uh, the guts to go and address it with their partner, or they do it in a wrong way. So you're in the middle of having sex and then you start fighting. Having sex in the middle of the bedroom is like the worst place to have a discussion on your sexual issues. So make sure that if you're going to talk about sexual dissatisfaction that you have, do it outside of the bedroom. Don't
Find
do it.
someplace very
Yeah,
unsexy that you're
yeah.
not going to sully.
Well, plus you're like in the future, you're not gonna want to have sex because it's gonna bring back
Yeah,
that
don't bring
member.
that bad energy into the bed. I hear
Exactly.
that.
So it's like talk about your sexual issues outside of the bedroom. Like make a time to schedule that discussion. Don't ignore it. And don't when you're talking about it, make sure that you create a safe space and you don't point the finger towards the other person. Make sure that you talk about it in I statement, and that you're trying to, this is something that you would like to solve with your partner so that it brings you back closer together. So the result of solving that issue is going to make it better. If you don't talk about it, then the time that you're going to have sex, the intervals in between your sexual activity are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Hmm.
You're probably going to start thinking about somebody else in your head a lot more than just to fantasize about it. But it's going to be like, oh my God, like sex with anybody else, but with my partner is going to be like, would be nice at this point. So if you mismanage the sexual discrepancy, if you don't face it, at one point it will become a bigger problem, even to the point of separation.
Yeah. What kinds of misinformation or flawed assumptions muddy the waters here? Because I feel like so much of this is just based on lack of communication, like you're highlighting, lack of a willingness to be present with these issues and working through them. What kinds of bad assumptions get in the way?
Well, bad assumption. You can say that an assumption is that women want less sex than men.
Sure.
That would be a myth. That would be, like if the women were brought up with all the same tools of accepting their sexuality, of being allowed to masturbate as freely as men when they're growing up and when they're an adult female, if they had all the same rights, same education, same no repercussion, like if you're allowed to take the pill and not get pregnant and stuff like that, then maybe her libido would be as healthy as the men. So
Hmm.
maybe education needs to be different for that myth to disappear.
I'm
Um,
amazed at how many parents are just bewildered that little girls do masturbate, that little
yeah.
girls discover and explore their bodies the same ways that little boys do.
Yeah, and like I in my practice, I see a lot of female that bring a lot of shame, and they're just not comfortable letting go because all the messages that they had when they were growing up were good little girls don't do that. Well, your entire upbringing up until it's okay for you to be the kinky like goddess in bed, now suddenly, like, I'm supposed to be a virgin, and then I'm supposed to be the, like, the kinkiest person in bed, and then eventually
Sure.
my, like, so the messages are very like, how can I have a sexuality that's for me, instead of for when you think it's okay for me to be liberated and enjoying my sexuality, you know? So I find that the good little girls don't do that. Messages
Yeah.
are gonna make sure that I'm gonna have a lot of clients for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it does feel like a safe field to be in, no question. And I
Yes.
want to value sexual health. Like I want to, of course, not say anything to suggest that we shouldn't be working with professionals like yourself and working towards developing a healthy sexuality in a society that doesn't really support it.
Mhm.
At the same time, I have to ask why there's so much tension, you think, around this specific issue, or why it's difficult for us to communicate and work around it, because we don't expect our partners to exercise the exact same way or the exact same amount that we do. We might, sleep in the same bed, and we might relatively expect that they would want the same amount of sleep that we do, but sometimes they stay up later than us and vice versa. Why is it that when it comes to sex, we expect everybody to be just automatically on the same page?
So I blame Disney for this.
Fair. Yeah.
So Disney basically told you that you will chase that ideal person. There's only one person for you, for your that's out there, and then you go on a hunt and you go for that search, and then you find that person, and you've done everything in your power to get that person. And once you have that person and you go into a long-term relationship, you start to take that person for granted as well. And then you don't see them, or you don't put the work that's necessary into your relationship, and then you gain 40 pounds, or and then you let go, and then you're like, but he's stuck with me, or she's stuck with me for the rest of our life
Yeah,
together.
that
you,
Disney
you know
idea definitely shows up in terms
Oof,
of relationships are things that have to be tended. It,
definitely.
it doesn't just magically stay the way that it is. It's
but
always going to change. You have to guide that change.
but Prince Charming is going to take care of all of my needs.
Yeah,
And I
exactly. It should just
kind
happen because of magic and
I
love.
know, and I disagree with that, because I seriously think that it takes a village. Like, when I need a gardener, it's not going to be my partner that's going to be the best, necessarily the best at doing that, or the
No.
mechanics, or taking care of the kids, or the cook, or the whatever. But now suddenly my partner that I live with, he's supposed to be good at everything, and he's going to solve all of my needs. And now in bed, it's the same thing. So now I have my best friend, my he's supposed to be like the best stripper, the best sexual at guy at cunnilingus, or whatever, like he's supposed to be like my biggest fantasies all at once, everywhere. It's kind of a big bill to put on somebody's shoulder. There's a lot of expectation. So sexual satisfaction, you're looking at your partner, and you have all of the weight that you're putting on them, and then your partner necessarily is not going to be the best at all of those tasks. And then
Sure.
suddenly you're going to look at your partner and go like, I'm a bit disappointed, I'm not as turned on. It's like,
I
okay,
sacrificed everything for you? Yeah.
level of expectation is massive. So come back down to earth, make sure that you see your partner for the quality that he or she has, and make sure that you don't think that you're God's gift to the other person. Come back down to earth on what
Well,
like,
enjoy the sex that you're having rather than
that's
fretting over the sex that you're not having,
yeah,
right? Like
stop watching Netflix, and definitely.